Hey guys, welcome to Solo ReacTalk. Today I'm going to be reacting to Star Wars vs. Warhammer 40K episode 28. Warriors, War, Machines, War. Yes, made by AFanWithTooMuchTime. If you want to check out my previous reactions to the other episodes, remember the playlist card is going to be at the top here. Just click on it and be able to access them. If you want to check out the original video as well as AFanWithTooMuchTime's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. Yes, Star Wars vs. Warhammer 40K episode 27, Saint Lazarus, was an amazing episode. I really did enjoy it, especially towards the end with what happened to Shadrach. I'm still awaiting his death, but he's now been kicked out of the, what do they call it, the Basilica, I think that's what it's called, you know, the Sister Superior, kicked him out. And now he's out there in the wilderness fending for himself, and hopefully the clone troops can pick him out, and him and his entire cadre, because I don't think he's going alone out there in the battlefield. He's going out there with his attendants. And then we also had the fight with Saphran, Mace, Jarro, and someone else. I forgot who else. But the Jedi that are facing against Saphran, they are still fighting against him. They're probing his mind. They're able to witness his memories of when he was still a young child, being inducted into the Astartes and becoming one of the Astartes. And yeah, it was a really harrowing experience, if I can say that. Harrowing experience for Saphran. And it's what made him into what we see today, this war machine, this unbeatable, unbreakable librarian of the Crimson Razors. So yeah, that was also kind of cool. And then we also got to be with Sando and Boss, Fixer, Scorch, I think. Yes, Scorch of the the elite troops of the clone troops, the commando units. And yeah, they're fighting against Sisters of Battle on the streets of Axum, and it's not looking good. It's not looking good. The Sisters of Battle are really pushing them. They are relentless, they are fearsome, and their helmets with the green eyes are just so terrifying in the night. And you hear the music, you see the incense smoke, hovering around all these Sisters of Battle, and it's not looking good for the clone troops where Sando is fighting. And yeah, guys, I guess that's it. Oh yes, the Emperor. Oh, not the Emperor yet. The Chancellor has organized a victory fleet with upgraded Venators and other forms of vessels and starfighters, and they're all heading over to Axum to assist or to reinforce the forces that are already fighting against the Imperium of Man. I wonder, will they arrive there in time, or will they arrive there and it will fail? I'm not sure. We'll have to just wait and see what happens. But yeah, the Chancellor is going to be the hero of this entire operation. Amazing. Okay, let us start. 3, 2, 1, go.
he had nothing left. And from where his strength now came, he could only barely begin to guess, and had no interest in doing so. All that mattered was that Sando still had more to give. Always more. The clone was limping, feet shuffling as he descended as quickly as he could down the rubble slope, whilst also ensuring his feet remained safely beneath him. Drool dripped past his gritting teeth as he struggled to force himself through the strobing pain he felt coming from a spot on his leg, about a hand span from his left knee where he had taken a bad hit. How bad? He did not know yet, but it wasn't bad enough to prevent his incremental retreat, so he questioned nothing else about it.
Is this a general retreat? Or is it just Sando, still... I don't want to say he's running away. I'm not entirely sure if this is just part of his plans as well, like, with episode 27, when he was just, running away, kind of looked like he was running away from battle. I'm not sure. Okay.
He knew he'd be able to move faster were it not for the commando he was pulling along beside him. But each time he considered dropping the man, he found the thought paired with the idea of laying down and dying himself. For good or for ill, his brother at his side was perhaps the hidden strength he found to carry on, and even if he was not, good soldiers did not abandon their own. He clutched the armored forebrace of the commando sniper, which kept the man secure and hefted over Sando's shoulder, while the clone used his other hand to balance as he hit the base of the broken earth, and traversed the shattered and cratered street that had become the main body of the developing battle. His mind was still reeling. Everything had gone to hell so fracking fast. The bunker had been blown up, so their mission had been a technical success. Yet, more and more it was becoming obvious that the hard point they had hit had always been nothing more than a stalling tactic. A road bump to force the slow of their advance long enough for these new destroyers to arrive and do the actual work.
It's kind of the operation tactics of the Imperium of Man. They oversaturate you with their foot soldiers and make you believe that, you're winning, you're getting close to that victory point, and then the special forces units come in. Maybe it might be the Astartes or the Scutari or the Sisters of Battle or anyone else. Like, it's all these special, highly powerful, highly effective units that come in at that last minute to crush you when you are exhausted, when you feel as if that you've done enough and the enemy is going to capitulate, and then bang, they surprise you with something new. Yeah.
Sando and the other clones had been blasted and smoked out of their cover by a flanking force of what he could only assume to be female space marines. But they were different from what had been described to Sando and the others in the debrief. More vicious, more reckless, more willing to stare down death and worse for the mere privilege to strike a killing blow against their foe.
These ladies are radical. You cannot negotiate with them. You can't, show mercy. No, they won't give you that. They won't give you back that in kind. So you're dealing with radical zealotry here. Yeah.
Sando had seen their faces, witnessed their eyes through cracked lenses and shattered helmets. He had expected to see monsters or humans. What he saw instead was the world-eating madness of the alien Imperial faith. The majority of the second clone force had been annihilated in seconds, and what managed by haste or cunning to survive had been sent running down the rubble-strewn slope of the tiered sidewalks and towards the main avenue. However, this was little better than what had assailed them from above, as many clones had discovered, running straight into the crossfire being exchanged by the initial Imperial defense and the Republic's own advancing vanguard forces. Those with some modicum of ARC trooper or commando training, like Sando and the Deltas, had managed to escape the slaughter by the barest of margins, and mostly by keeping to the sides, remaining low and staying swift, only forced into the street by the intercession of collapsed buildings, brought down by a combination of Republic collateral and the wanton destruction of the Imperials. Even now, Sando was unsure if he was suffering from a blaster wound or some perverse emperor-worshipping death weapon. Less fortunate than him had been the commando known as Sev, who had been running ahead of Sando on the slope towards the street. The insane clone had been hefting a sniper rifle, or at least the sniper rifle configuration of his powerful DC-17M. How on earth the man could run over ground like this and shoot accurately as he did was something even Sando struggled to understand. But the impressive display had been cut dramatically short only moments later. A missile. Someone had perhaps noticed the clone's running maneuver and had been impressed enough by it to lob some kind of rocket or missile in the Delta's direction. It came in on a blazing tail of black smoke, and it would have killed them both had the commando not shot it mid-flight, nailing the explosive head of the projectile dead center with his sniper configuration.
Wow, that's quite impressive. Huh.
Sando would have doubted that the deed was even remotely possible had it not occurred right before his eyes, and saved his life to boot. But, unfortunately, the missile had gotten close enough to Sev to throw him clear from his feet, hurling the clone against the slope's uneven surface. The commando hit the rough floor with an impact that rattled Sando's bones, tumbling him about before ultimately leaving the specialist dazed on the ground, laying flat save for a leg which was obviously twisted and broken. Sando had almost found the weakness to simply limp past his brother in arms, but he could clearly see that Sev was still alive, and they were so close, both so close. So he had paused for a fraction of a moment and chose to painfully haul the trooper up onto his shoulder, cursing himself all the while, and together they limped down the rubble and through the fields of fire, praying to the gods they did not have for survival.
I would like to hear them pray to the gods. Yeah, no, that would be quite interesting.
Admittedly, Sev did more than pray, gathering strength enough to heft his blaster up with one hand as they both crossed into the stained chrome of the street. The clone growled as he began to blind fire his rifle over his shoulder, sending shots into the rubble and up towards the tide of gathering death which was now starting to pour over the lip of the ruins and building they had been contesting.
These ladies are relentless.
Sando could hear and feel the vibrations, the heralding of Doom's latest attempt to reach out and swallow the clone whole. And it was coming. The apparent female Space Marines had stopped only long enough to rally and organize in the cover that the clones had fled from, finishing off any of their surviving brothers that had been trapped there, before forming assault ranks.
I'm just wondering, these clones that are retreating or that are pushing, going back, where are they going back to? Is there like a operating base that the clones have back wherever they're heading to? I'm not entirely sure. It's not looking good, really. Honestly, it's just not looking good for any of the Republic's, soldiers or forces on this planet. And we still haven't heard about the civilians. Do you guys remember the Axum civilians have now, made themselves into militia groups, and they're fighting against the Imperium of Man, and they're also not going so well, So, yeah, it just looks bad all around here. Palpatine, come and save your people.
Then, raising punitive weapons into the air, they screamed blatant rage-riddled war cries into the rain-stifled sky, and the fighting from both sides seemed to stutter and almost cease in sudden appreciation of their hate. It was clear to all present that something horrifying or wonderful was about to happen. The difference standing on a factional crux. The moment came, and then the moment passed. Though the hellish saints of the Imperial forces did not cease their cries as they began, charging, shooting, and flying into the air on wings of resplendent flame. Like an avalanche composed of gorgeous, sanctified ruination and animus towards all life, they fell upon the rear of the survivors, butchering the men who remained on the slope before wading into the street, utterly heedless of return fire and friendly fire. Their scything was absolute, and had Sando and Sev not been nearer to the front of the retreating men, they would never have made it for as long as they did. Coughing fumes and propelling themselves against the promise of death, the two clones managed to cross the ragged front line, limping as best they could, almost collapsing once they scrambled over and past the trench that had been beaten into the street. Yet something in Sando warned him, made him feel no safer falling here than falling in the middle of that street. He pulled the two of them even further, and Sev cursed, but voiced no more complaints than that as he looked over his shoulder. Sando did not even try, focusing on their retreat and failing to see what Sev had glimpsed. The sisters came on and did not even pause as they crested the front line.
Look at this image. Oh gosh, look at the bodies just blowing up. Oh, and I can see like there's a little fireball that's also coming out from the clones. I think maybe that's the explosive round of the bolter gun. Yeah. Oh, terrible.
Trampled over most of the troopers, fanatical voices raised in haunting, world-ending cries of war, as toothed blades and glowing swords hacked down again and again, cutting men and machines to inert pieces. Each voiced hymn becoming a screamed triumph. Some weapons managed to catch and wound the armored warriors, throwing them off their feet and cracking their shells open, revealing the maddened humans within. But the Republic clones simply were not armed with enough of these, with only specialized troopers carrying what was needed to begin fighting back. Blaster fire hissed and sizzled against the armored Imperials, but with
and yes, what happened in episode 27? Like there was a lot of clone troops shooting at one particular sister of battle, and she got cooked in her own armor. If only they could replicate that right now. However, it doesn't seem like they have the numbers to do that again, so that option is off the table. And their heavy weapons are not enough, and they don't have any mobile artillery weapons or heavy caliber weapons that are moving on wheels, if I can say that. So yeah, I don't know where they're going to retreat to. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Not an excess of men assembled and ready to focus fire, boiling the women alive in their battle suits became non-viable as a strategy.
Exactly.
The result was predictable. Sando and Sev ran on, frantic, panting, and losing speed. He knew they were finished, that they would be sighted down and destroyed at any moment, and soon. And what he did not know was where in the hell he was going. The answer presented itself to the two beleaguered clones as they crested the top of a half-buried ATTE that lay in their path. Sore eyes softening on the sight of the rear advancing line of the vanguard. And to the tremendous relief of all involved, they had evidently prepared heavier weapons, just in case of a Space Marine threat. Sando and Sev scrambled and fell down the side of the ruined walker, narrowly avoiding the first of the pursuing sisters, who came over the top of the leg tank in several places as well as around the sides. appearing in a near unbroken line as they sought to continue their charge. Sando made to get up and run, but Sev used his weight and leverage to haul the clone down and cover him with his body, an act that saved them both.
Sando, what's going on, man? Are you really trying to run away? There's nowhere to run to. There's no escape from this. It's either you fight here or you fight, at the last stand. You're still going to be fighting, So, rather stay here with your clone troop brethren and fight, and maybe there'll be a way for you guys, to claim some sort of victory. I don't know, but retreating, or should I say running away from battle, where to, I'm not sure. It's not going to help you in this. It's just not.
PLX missile launchers fired from the advancing vanguard ranks, their guided heads soaring around the two clones, aimed over them or to the sides and colliding explosively with the pursuing sisters. Warheads powerful enough to stall and stop starships pelted with ruthless precision into the raging front ranks of the Imperial forces. Blast waves rolled out, flamethrowers and Imperial munitions detonating as the Republic projectiles performed their lethal functions. The sisters rose from that ruin, however, some shining, most standing, gritting frenzied teeth in a promise of vengeance. Then came the second salvo, and then the third. In the face of the enfilade and the savage losses they were sustaining, the female Space Marines, or at least what Sando had taken to be female Space Marines, fell back to the trench line they had taken and began to rally once more.
Are you guys ready for the second course? They're preparing it right now.
Other clones found the two, covered in scrap and ash, pulling them back behind the fighting to treat them and apply Bacta. Scant minutes later, Sando found himself sitting on a munitions crate. A set of warmed, hastily offered rations sitting in his lap as he watched the ordered lines of his brothers starting to push further and further forward. As the stiff legs of the ATTEs began to pass his position, firing even then as they entered the battle, he even dared to hope the pendulum of the battle had begun to swing in the Republic's direction.
Should we tell him? Should we tell him? I don't want to tell him. Let him just figure it out by himself, He'll realize, he'll just understand that it's not over.
But the Republic was not the only force that had begun to deploy heavy armored vehicles to their front line. And Sando felt his stomach tighten too much to eat anything as he saw three forms rising into view from behind the various obstructions of the battlefield.
Titans? Or?
He heard them first, had been hearing them in fact, but only now did he realize what it was he was hearing behind all the noises that filled the battlesphere.
Okay, I can't do that horn, the horn that Titans make. I can't do it. But yeah.
It was music. Not unlike the hymns shouted from the armored Imperials, but louder and instrumental.
Oh. Okay. Okay, maybe it's not Titans then.
It had begun as a distant swell that now grew staggeringly loud, and the clone could see why. Massive golden speakers, encrusted heavily with artistic depictions of angels and death, blasted the noise from the sides of the large, box-shaped tanks. Each of the three which approached was a customized, shining work of art, and each bore a pew at its head, each pew occupied by one of the armored warrior sisters they now contended with. But most notable were the golden pipes and spines that rose up from behind the presumed preacher of destruction.
Presentation is important to the Sisters of Battle. Presentation. You know, you have to come into battle in style. You can't just come here with regular stuff. Presentation is important. Yeah, I mean, I thought this was going to be like a Titan coming in here, but no, this is also good. This is also very good.
Like the massive, fluted implements of an enormous organ, they towered and shimmered, the centerpiece of each of the tanks. From the front of each vehicle protruded a fat, heavy weapon, spitting explosive projectiles towards the clones as they advanced. Sando could see the Vanguard forces aligning to destroy the tanks with another salvo of their PLXs. But before the first missile could find its lock, the organs atop the enemy vehicles began to play. Missiles fired from each of the pipes, smoke and flame issuing as the music blared from the tanks and rose in a deafening, glorious crescendo. The missiles that flew free of the gilded tubes arched high into the air and began to rain down. The Republic returned fire, missiles and ATTE-mounted railguns scrambling to destroy the blocky vehicles before they could fire off another rain. But already the first was on its way. All forces were struck at nearly the same time, and all suffered greatly, but the Republic suffered more. The missiles came straight down, evading most cover and striking the ATTEs on the top of their chassis, where their main guns were mounted. Whole squads of clones in secure positions were blasted into gory fountains, and most of the arriving ATTEs found themselves either crippled or entirely disabled. For the Republic's part, only one of the 3 tanks managed to survive the returning fire, the smoking, ruined thing limping backwards and away from the front, unable to fire again. But the damage had been done, and the sisters had capitalized on it, charging once more and meeting not with another killing field, but with contested and pitched resistance. The battle was not decided, but it was going sour fast. Sando hesitated and began to stand. "Where are you going?" asked Sev from nearby, his broken leg now locked in a fast cast.
Yes, where are you going, Sando? I just told you there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. It's either you die here or you die later. Okay.
"I'm retreating," Sando said. "There's no point." Sev snapped back. "Nothing behind us but the main column. You can fight then, or you can fight here," he said, rigging his DC-17 into an anti-armor grenade launcher configuration. "Then why fight here?" Sando demanded angrily. "Because we're needed here," the commando growled, as if the answer was the most basic of all common-sense answers. And it was. Sando felt suddenly ashamed of himself. He had poured out so much of himself that he had fooled his own mind into believing that he was not being a coward. That he had done enough. But enough was not done until the Republic won, and that responsibility was Sando's as much as it was Sev's. "You're right." "Of course I am," said Sev. "Now come take this pistol from my hip. Grab that DC-15 lying over there. Jack it up to maximum power, and help me get up."
The clone troops are lucky they don't have commissars in their ranks. They're lucky they don't have someone with a pistol ready to shoot you in the face should you just turn your back. Just once. Just turn your back once. It's over. You know, they're lucky they don't have commissars. Anakin? Uh-oh. Skanda. Is he really gonna take over his body? Ooh.
Anakin fell to his knees almost at once. He pushed his senses and abilities within the Force towards the Blackstone rod, clutched in his hand, and felt it swell with unnatural power. But no sooner had this strength come upon him than it was suddenly and mercilessly assailed. He felt as though he had suddenly been thrust under a freezing waterfall of liquid lead, and it was trying with each surging concussion to force his hand away from the rod. He clenched his metal fist as tightly as he could, not allowing himself to be repulsed as he struggled under the weight of the suppression. All the while, Kaon waited and watched. He observed as the Jedi faltered, and even began to wonder if his strength was already expended enough for an attempt to occur. But bent as he was, Anakin remained unbowed, and slowly, gradually, his power seemed to build. His face was reddening, his false hand creaking, and the Chaos Sorcerer of the Thousand Suns found himself being impressed as the Jedi General managed to gradually push the null presences around them back and away. Is this enough? Anakin asked.
Almost.
Said Kaon.
Give it everything.
He added.
No!
And Anakin seemed to comply. The veil was now lifted, parting under the surge of Anakin's remaining strength, and Kaon got to work. It was a simple matter, infiltrating the lame shadow thoughts of the servitors, inducing a large, catastrophic aneurysm between the 9 suspended weapons. Thanks to their integrated systems, the very thing meant to keep them safe from each other. The results spread from the initial victim out and through to all of them, and soon they were quivering and losing targeting cohesion as blood pooled in their brains and dripped from their eyes and noses. The 2 masked women noticed the disturbance right away, but Kaon was also attacking them as well, appearing beside them as an illusion of his former intact self. The 2 trained women, already on the edge from the failure of the gun servitors, reacted instantly, without fear or even the semblance of hesitation, raising shotguns and discharging into the illusion. One died instantly, her face blown away by the blast of her companion. The other died more slowly, her stomach and chest having taken the brunt of the point-blank discharge.
So they shot themselves? Wow, this illusion was really powerful. Very convincing. Huh.
In seconds, the wall of guns and vigilance that guarded their destination had fallen, and now all that remained was for the Jedi to fall as well. Are you done? Anakin grunted through grit teeth.
Almost.
Let go, Anakin. Let go. Let it go.
Said Kaon, watching without eyes as Anakin began to shake, his body beginning to convulse. The sorcerer had no intention of allowing Anakin to destroy himself, patiently waiting for the exact moment, prepared to take the burden on his own body when the instant of transference was upon them. He waited, but while Anakin seemed to falter, to waver, to come within inches of his defeat, he did not fall. He was a truly impressive psyker, and the display of his raw will and talent only made Kaon crave escaping his own ruined body all the more.
He is the chosen one.
But with every passing moment, the man known as Kingbreaker became more and more anxious as well. They were already connected via the rod, and Kaon could feel the odd way in which the warp seemed to move within the man. Then it happened. The first part of him to give way, to Kaon's surprise, was his mechanical arm, which shattered like frozen glass. For a moment there was despair, for the Chaos Space Marine had not anticipated that the machine would fail before the flesh did. And with his connection to the rod broken, the transference would be hampered. Or so he had thought. But quick as reflex, Anakin switched hands, making the shift almost the instant his mechanical arm failed him. He clapped the palm of his true hand against the black steel, re-establishing the connection before it could do more than waver, and the result made Kaon flounder in his attempt to understand. Before, Anakin had been approaching the control and power of a single Thousand Suns sorcerer before the gift of Gene Seed was bestowed onto them. The blood of Magnus always flushed those with psychic power with even more strength. But if one was not already sufficiently powerful, the rubric would take them. Anakin was far above what would have been required. But now, with his bare hand in contact with the rod, the change was astronomical. Anakin roared, his strength rolling out from the rod in Kaon's shoulder like an unexpected tidal wave. It was overwhelming. His power did much more than lift the null veil which pervaded the space. It tore it completely asunder. Screams echoed from throats all around the prison as Blanks and Sisters of Silence fell to their knees. All but the darkest among them suddenly succumbing to the unexpected wave of psychic force, their heads bursting into gory fountains in its wake. And it continued to roll outwards even after that. The machinery which maintained the null field around the exit belched sudden smoke and died in the arms of its panicking tech priests. The astropads of the ship's choir cried out in sudden surprise, hearing the roar of Anakin's effort carried in the wind. The ship navigator clutched his face and released a bone-chilling shriek. His third eye, bulbous and black in the center of his head, bleeding torrents of opaque blood as it was blinded by the sudden proximity to Anakin's psychic exertion. Kaon was so stunned by this, so caught off guard, that it was not until smoke began to rise from the burning skin around the Blackstone rod that he began to realize that now he was the one in danger of being overcome.
Whoa, Anakin. I wonder, are you as powerful as at least like Malkador the Sigillite? I don't know about the Emperor. I think he's just far beyond anyone in 2 galaxies. But, you know, are you equivalent to Malkador the Sigillite? I think you are. Or maybe Malkador is just a bit more stronger. Maybe. Yeah.
With as much haste as he could, he altered his plans, sliding into Anakin's presence with all the subtlety he could muster. Grateful that the Jedi was so utterly distracted by his task, and placing upon him a mark. Kaon's mark. It was far, far less than he had desired, for this mark had no anchoring, no potency that the Jedi could not merely wipe away at a whim. Already his mind was shifting, turning, recalculating how he must leverage what he had to get what he wanted. But even as he did this, a part of him could not help but be fixed in awe of this surprise. No wonder he had been able to force some of his psychic might even within the null field. What he saw now could be nothing less than an Alpha Plus display of raw power.
Alpha Plus. I like that.
Power he was certain neither of them had known about, at least until now.
It is done.
Kaon said, and was relieved as Anakin heard and released the rod, falling out of his crouch as he did. How was that? Anakin asked, breathing heavily and wiping his face.
It was good, Anakin. It was really, really, really good. You surprised me. You surprised the Skanda. You surprised us all. Very good. Very good.
R2-D2, who had been silently following the pair down the hall, rolled up to his friend, whirring and beeping excitedly. Kaon was at a temporary loss for words. Anakin smiled at his droid companion, using him to help himself stand, resting his hand on his knees and taking several tempering breaths. Phew. Feels nice. I thought I'd have to keep that veil lifted the whole time, but I can feel the, warp again. How long will this last? Kaon? He asked after a moment.
Kaon is too stunned to speak. He's too stunned to speak right now. Probably he's just contemplating like, what am I going to do now? You know, this has failed. What am I going to do now? I need to get rid of this boy.
You never told me you were so powerful.
Kaon's response was flat, almost deadpan. And Anakin nearly blushed at that, scratching his head in mild chagrin. Well, I may or may not be the chosen one, according to a certain prophecy.
Guys, where does this prophecy come from? I don't think I've actually gone into this or researched this up. Like, where does this prophecy of the chosen one will bring balance to the Force? I think I need to, research that out.
Power comes with the territory, I guess. But we'll have to talk about this later. For now, we need to move. I have no idea how long until the suppression returns, but we should try to get your weapons before then, said Anakin, entirely unaware of the significance of his power. Kaon had wondered if he was aware of his own strength since the moment he had released the rod, but now he was certain that Skywalker was not. And the answer as to how he could be ignorant of his own strength had been given in the same breath in which his ignorance had been revealed.
Chosen? Chosen by whom? For
The Force.
what?
To bring balance to the Force. That sounds so weird. You were chosen by the Force to bring balance to the Force. Very confusing.
Kaon said. We don't have time. The veil... Anakin started.
The veil is torn, Anakin. You tore it away completely. Now, tell me, chosen by whom? By the Jedi? By the Republic?
Kaon almost yelled, rounding on Anakin, and had he still had his arms, he would have grabbed him as well. Anakin seemed suddenly weary in the face of Kaon's unexpected intensity. Neither. The prophecy says I was chosen by the will of the Force, Anakin said somewhat clumsily.
The Force. What is that?
Kaon growled. Yeah, your language does not express it correctly, Kaon, but to you it would be the warp, said Anakin. The words were like a strike upon the bell of his mind, setting his whole being ringing with shock and new possibility.
You are chosen by the will of the warp. For what purpose?
Kaon insisted. To bring balance, Anakin yelled back. Balance to the warp, the galaxy. That is my destiny according to the prophecy, said the general. The words left the two in anxious silence, Kaon almost rocking back on his heels as he attempted to absorb the meaning behind the words.
I mean, it just sounds weird though, really. It really sounds weird. Oh, I have a phone call. Hold up. Okay, let's get back into it.
The words left the two in anxious silence, Kaon almost rocking back on his heels as he attempted to absorb the meaning behind the words. Chosen by the will of the warp to bring balance to the warp and to the galaxy? This was not an alien prophecy. This was something Kaon had heard before. This was something he thought he had already accounted for. The sheer impossibility of it turned nearly all of Kaon's perspectives on their head.
So they also have a prophecy in the Warhammer 40K galaxy that, you know, there's a chosen one, chosen by the warp. Okay, interesting.
But there was, as Anakin had said, no time. The hallways flashed red, alarms sounding and blaring from boxes and lights mounted along the ceiling. The prison was starting to react. It's time to go, now or never, Anakin said, turning the corner to the now dead hallway and dashing towards the large steel doors, drawing his lightsaber as he did and activating it. The blade collided with the surface of the doors, but it splintered and was repulsed. The metal there made of something he could not easily penetrate. But what saber and light could not penetrate, R2-D2 breached, jacking himself into a nearby wall socket and chirping as he hacked open the door instead. The double doors slowly swung open, and Anakin cast a glance back at the Chaos Space Marine, who still stood at the mouth of the corridor.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at this, artist depiction of Anakin Skywalker with the Chaos insignia on his forehead like that. Oh, wow. And those eyes. Yikes.
Kaon, come on! He called one last time, turning to see that the double doors opened into a turbo lift that led further down. This time, Kaon did react, wordlessly catching up and entering the lift. Anakin did not need to ask the maimed Marine which floor to take, as there was only one selection, pressing it before regarding the sorcerer with a worried expression. As they got further and further away from the screeching of the alarms, Anakin realized that, while Kaon was not talking to him, he was muttering under his breath. The Jedi tried to listen in, but had little time to do so before they arrived at their destination, only managing to catch one phrase from the suddenly disturbed Marine, before stepping out of the lift. Ever chosen.
Ever chosen?
Jocasta left the healing to her fellow master. An old woman like herself had less life force to share than the younger Stas, and redirected her focus towards the battle.
I can imagine this as Saphran. Really, I can.
The masters there seemed to have everything well in hand, having already wounded the Space Marine they contended against, as well as having disabled a portion of his armor. Now the Marine was engaged in a countercharge which seemed doomed to failure. Both Master Mace Windu and Master Jarro Tapal extended their hands to pull on the warrior again, and she could feel the intensity of their will expanding out as they prepared to receive him once more. And for the last time, she suspected. Jarro Tapal was the last among them to take a half measure, and Mace was not prone to acts of mercy when it came to dealing with those swathed in the dark side. This charge would finish it. But then, she sensed the Imperial Librarian extend his mind out to meet them in the meta space between their expanding minds, and reached out with her own as well. She chose not to entangle herself in it, but observed with no small amount of fascination as the collision occurred. Jocasta had seen and read much. She was the chief librarian of her order, after all. And so she had a great amount of reference to consult as she saw the alien techniques of the Space Marines spill forth. Having meditated under and studied Sith holocrons, Jocasta's first observation of note was how different the emanations of the Space Marines seemed to those of even the Sith.
I'm, that's quite interesting to hear that Jedi are, researching on Sith techniques and Sith knowledge through the holocrons. I mean, wouldn't that affect them in some sort of way? Wouldn't that turn them to the dark side just a bit? Slowly but surely. Interesting.
The Sith dominated the Force, chained it, tearing and dragging it into position. The Jedi flowed through it and with it, joining their might to existing waves in order to create tsunamis of Force. But this Imperial did neither. The Space Marine's emanations rolled out of him like a wave of caustic oil, mingling with and burning the metaspace at the same time. The technique was multi-layered and esoteric, not a mere emanation or expression of power, but a complicated and ritualized deployment of the Force. Such things were possible for the Jedi and Sith, but seldom without the aid of several practitioners, and even more rarely while in the midst of combat. The result was catastrophically effective, doing more than merely shrugging off telekinetic grips of the Jedi Masters, but catching those spars of their will they had sent forth in slick nets of psychic force, which quickly tangled and spun around each of their minds. The technique seemed similar to the mind-shattering torture of a memory prison, but in place of drawing out the worst memories of the Jedi it assailed, it used the memories of the assailer instead, which made it much easier to achieve. Jocasta watched as Mace began to spin and twirl his saber in place, his mind and body already moving through the forms of Vapad, and devouring the strands of darkside energy which enwrapped his spirit, turning ready to meet the charge with a greater energy than he had had before.
Careful, guys, careful.
He was unscathed by whatever he had been made to pass through, and had escaped the mind prison to avoid another. But Master T'Pol was not able to use Vapad, and twitched, face held in a sudden rictus of pain as he was paralyzed, his mind continuing to endure the enemy librarian's mental assault. Then, the Space Marine was physically upon them, releasing a deafening roar as he swung his stave towards Master Mace Windu. The air screamed as it passed, but the Jedi Master ducked the strike and backstepped the kick which followed. For a moment, Master Nu dared hope that the Space Marine had forgotten about T'Pol and was content to focus on Master Windu while Jarro recovered from the technique. Something she could already see happening as the large warrior shook his head and began to turn for a re-engagement. Then, a mule kick from the Marine caught the Master in the ribs and sent the massive Jedi tumbling into the air to land heavily against a nearby pillar of Gothic stone. Master Windu attempted to pay the warrior back, sliding under the guard of his stave again and punching out 4 times in a single second with his free hand, while his saber braced itself against the Marine's weapon. The fist crunched the ceramic metal where the Space Marine's liver should be. The pounding pulped open a weakened line of once rent armor plating, but before Mace could throttle his fist into the Imperial again, the floor beneath them burst into molten sprays of metal. Master Windu performed an admirable job of warding off the now airborne splashes of red-hot steel, but could not avoid them all, crying out in frustration and pain as his robe burst into flames at the contact. The Marine took the moment to grab the Jedi by the neck with his free, unpowered hand, keeping the other on his stave and pulling in to force the Jedi's weapon to remain pinned. Jocasta felt a sudden thrill of fear fill her body and shiver down her stomach and spine. Without a word, she unslung the box she had carried in over her shoulder and began to open it, removing the barrel, canister, and receiver of an ancient weapon. One which she had hoped not to use.
Oh, okay, show us.
Though her hands moved in conjunction with the Force, working to assemble the device quickly, she would not move quickly enough to save Mace Windu. That task fell to Depa Billaba, who had been awaiting her chance to strike. blue saber sliding through the air, she threw herself from her hiding place while the Space Marine was busy crushing Master Windu. The Jedi Master was choking, his free fist slamming again and again into the Space Marine's unpowered gauntlet, cracking it and smashing away much of its mass as his other, shaking arm kept the sparking stave from sliding back and bisecting him. Even unpowered, the hand-choking Mace was quickly passing the level of force required for strangulation.
Like really, Saphran could just, snap his neck. Done. But he's playing with his food here. Saphran is playing with his food. Honestly. He could just, it's over.
And was beginning to test the solidity of the Jedi's neck and spinal column when his savior's blue blade pierced the Marine's back and then chest, cutting out the Imperial's heart in the process. Balaba's teeth were born in a grin which expressed delight and bloodthirst in equal, terrible measure.
Yeah? That doesn't sound good. That does not sound good. I think she is being consumed by the dark side. How can you enjoy all of this? Lady, no. Take a step back, and start meditating. I think you're being consumed by the dark side.
As she stole the life from the Marine who had sorely wounded and slaughtered her comrades.
I have said this before. I will not accept that a Space Marine or anyone from the Imperium of Man is dead until you decapitate them. Unless if that doesn't happen, this person is not dead. This person is not dead. Okay? They will come back. Somehow, some way, they will come back. So the only thing that I will accept as confirmation that this person is dead is if you cut off the head. Yeah. And it must be at the neck, not just here, between the eyes and the nose and the mouth. No. They can still climb up and go, so it has to be at the neck. Yeah. And then you throw a grenade into the neck. Just for control, okay? Just for control.
The Imperial warrior did not fall right away, Balaba holding her place on his back as he choked the Jedi in his hand. Blood bursting forth from his mouth as the Marine grit his teeth and tried to finish the job. Master Balaba drew her saber out and made to stab him again, but this time the Imperial warrior did react, pivoting to strike Deppa's body with his staff as he tossed Mace Windu ruthlessly away. She was thrown from his back by the sudden movement, but twisted out of the way of the attack, landing smoothly and safely upon the ground, rising in challenge. The Space Marine, in contrast, seemed unable to resist the momentum of his own swing and collapsed upon the ground and was still. Briefly, there was a pause, and then a gradual, deafening silence. The last loud noise echoed as a ghost of itself in the massive orrery. The sound being that of Saphran's stave hitting the ground several feet from where he had collapsed. Then, silence gave way to subtlety, as every overstimulated ear which remained in the place began to reacclimate.
I want to celebrate, I want to congratulate you guys, but I can't. Because I know it in my bones that this guy's gonna come back from the dead and he's gonna kill one of you probably, or maybe even Mace Windu here. He might actually die. So I'm not celebrating until the end of the episode. So I'm waiting.
The air filling with the pants and groans of the remaining warriors, those still standing and those who were fallen but not dead. Yet, for all of that, this was not yet over, and the sound of a Jedi Master's boots striking the ground stood in punctuated defiance of the settling, silent atmosphere. Deppa stalked over to the librarian's body, seeing his eyes sluggishly tracking her as he coughed out more blood, armor rattling on the ground. She scowled down at the Marine with a tut and spat onto his body. The act elicited a belated, gargling roar from the Marine, who spat forth a gout of blue and red lightning from his mouth. The Jedi Master caught the torrent on her blade and flexed beneath the energy, laughing as she spun around the volts of Forceborn power. She was one of the three who knew how to use Vapad, and she used it now, devouring the strength thrown at her in fury and spite, and adding it to her own. But already Jocasta could see the intense shadow it cast over her, could see how her eyes burned like flames in her skull as she drank in the dark side and was unable to refuse it entirely.
She needs to stop and just sit down and meditate. Or I don't know, how do they, control themselves from descending further into the dark side? I don't know how do they do it. But yeah, however you do it, you gotta do it right now, lady. You're losing control.
Where Balaba had begun the battle attempting to use the incomplete mastery of the technique as little as possible, now she was clearly and arrogantly glorying in it. She spun closer and closer, weaving the lightning around her body with her blade of blazing light, until she was close enough to reach the Marine, at which point she kicked him in the head, causing him to abruptly cease his assault. But she did not stop there. Kicking again and again, stomping into his face with obscene glee, slamming the heel of her boot into the broken ruin of the Imperial's nose and torn lips over and over. When she stopped, she did not do so because she had finished with him or because he had grown still. She was stopped by the hands of Mace Windu and Jarro, both of whom had dragged themselves up and limped to her, grabbing her by either arm and pulling her away from the collapsed foe. She struggled against both, working herself free a moment later and turning on them, saber raised in open hostility.
This is reminding me of the Star Wars Old Republic cinematics. The two brothers, serving their... I forgot what that guy was called, the Eternal Emperor or something. And then, the brother, the one that was turning to the dark side, tried to fight his father, and the other brother, the one who wore black, pulled him away with the Force, and then he, unleashed his lightsaber. They started fighting, and then he killed him. So it's kind of like the same kind of situation right here with Balaba, her. How she's now being pulled away by her colleagues, but she's activating her lightsaber immediately, and she's prepared to fight against them. So yeah, she's lost control. She's really lost control.
Neither Jarro nor Mace Windu had their own sabers raised or activated. "What are you doing?" She snapped at them, eyes bright like fire over the beam of her blue blade.
"What are you doing, lady? Look at yourself."
"Saving you from making a mistake," said Jarro to Paul. Finish it and be done with it. We are Jedi, Balaba. We are not to drag out this task, nor to take delight in the suffering it causes. Stand aside. Let me behead him, if this is not already enough. The Jedi Lasat said to her. "It is not enough," she shouted back. "Look at those skeletons. Look at those wounded all around us. He butchered our order, our family, and he enjoyed it while he did it. What I do now is the least that could happen. The least of what that trash deserves. You must see that. It's so obvious." Depa contended. The other Jedi raised his hand in an appeal for peace, wincing as he performed the gesture. Several globs of hot metal were visibly burnt into his skin and robes, still sizzling and glowing softly, even after Mace had patted out the flames and embers from his robe. Master Nu scowled. It was all but obvious that Depa had waylaid her intervention for far too long, allowing both others to take severe injuries so that she could wait for her perfect opening. The only thing that is obvious is that you and I have both overused Vapad, and it has begun to affect our judgment. I know because I almost agree with you. But this is not the Jedi Code. This is not our way, said Master Windu. Indeed, snapped Master Nu herself as she rose, weapon in hand.
You know what? You guys are still taking time. Saphran is there. He's probably recuperating. You know, he's just getting a little bit of a breather. And then he's going to stand up again. You want to bet? Do you want to bet? I'm prepared. Let's bet 10. No, not 10. Maybe 100 rand. Well, I'm dealing with Americans mainly who watch my reactions. Okay, $100 on the table. Let's bet. He's going to stand up. He's going to stand up.
If he still lives, we should recover him. Having an enemy force wielder in our custody could reveal much about them, perhaps even become a bridge to peace between us.
No.
She added. Peace? Master Balaba shouted. Are you insane? There can be no peace with these monsters. It is not possible, Jocasta. And even if it were, they do not deserve it. The only thing they deserve is to die, slowly and painfully, knowing they failed to enforce the crazed regime. Don't you see? We are the only ones who can stop this. We can bring justice back to the galaxy. Enough.
You are going way off target now. Way off target now. What justice to the galaxy? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Hey, calm down. Switch off your lightsaber. Meditate.
Windu said, It is not justice to imitate our enemy. Stand aside and let me finish this. We shall not be taking the Imperial as a prisoner. His power is that of a Sith Lord. He is clearly too dangerous to be kept alive.
Hey, if you know, you know. If you don't, forget about it.
We do not torture, but our mercy will be a quick death, he said, activating his own blade once more. Jeppa snarled, widening her stance as if she planned to attack Mace for daring to countermand her. Jocasta felt her bones creak. And both she and Windu were too fixated on the hostile master before them to notice or stop what was about to happen. Jarro Tapal suddenly leapt forward, lightsaber activating as he jumped. The leap brought him inside of Deppa's guard, and he grasped her shoulder with his free hand while holding the saber staff high. But while Jocasta and Mace Windu had been too distracted by Balaba to notice Tapal's lunge before it occurred, Balaba herself had been watching all three and was ready. She twisted as he grabbed her, body spinning as she smoothly reversed the grip of her blade and plunged the blue blade into Tapal's chest. She grinned like a feral beast making a kill, Tapal staggering back, but keeping his grip despite how she had twisted, as if trying to pull her down. She drew out and spun her blade while turning her body again, cutting the offending hand clean at the wrist, and blasting the large master backward with a thrust of the force. Jarro groaned as he struck the hard ground, the smoking hole clear in his chest. But no sooner had he landed than the second blow was struck, but not by Balaba. Instead, the Jedi Master found herself the victim of a sudden attack, one which caught her from behind. Jocasta's mind was not able to process the events clearly for several moments as it was revealed that the Marine had managed to somehow, despite lacking a heart, drag himself back up to his feet. After doing so, the Imperial warrior had wasted no time in calling his stave back into his hand and swinging it horizontally again.
$100. Bring it here. Bring it here. Bring it here. Gosh.
The blow caught the unaware Depabalaba like a freighter going into hyperspace. Her body was shattered by the blow and thrown to the right, her legs bursting apart at the knees from the speed and force of the attack. She landed with a telltale series of crunches and a heavy thump, first against the far wall and then against the floor. The Space Marine known as Saphran rose to his full height then, as thick, unnatural blood continuously poured from his parted lips with every hard breath.
Damnable witch!
The Marine hissed through his red, ripped lips.
That is not possible! Your heart, your lungs, they are pierced, I know it!
Jocasta cried out, half in horror and half in outright denial. The Marine smiled a monster's smile at her in response, displaying some of the missing teeth that Depa had managed to dislodge earlier. He was slower, clearly wounded, weaker even. But he was not dead, and was not wounded onto uselessness. And as he turned to regard them fully, with only herself and a wounded Master Windu left to defy the monster, Jocasta felt true fear well within her like a hidden spring.
Cut my heart out.
The Marine asked in its terrible, deep voice.
Pierced my lungs.
He added as he stepped closer to them, the ground seeming to tremble beneath his boots.
Did you really think something like that would stop me? I am a Crimson Razor of the Emperor of Mankind. Pain cannot lay me low, for I am its lord, and it is my strength. I can feel no fear, nor bend beneath it, for I am fear incarnate. What are you but a broken sword and an old woman to stand behind it?
Whether the question was earnest or merely boastful, it hardly mattered.
The answer is yes.
The man was alive with the Force, and it was pouring off him like poison from a barb. He could still fight, and intended to, and Jocasta would be no match for him in a physical contest.
Round two.
Master beside her would be sorely tested with his new metallic burns getting in the way of his techniques. She truly doubted whether they would survive what came next. Then, a hand landed upon her shoulder. She turned with a suddenness born of nerves and saw Master Obi-Wan standing beside her. His leg healed enough for him to re-enter the fight. But barely, Jocasta could see as he limped past her to stand as a shield between the two librarians.
And now, the broken shield joins the fight. It is good that you did not run, Kenobi.
He really likes him, doesn't he? Saphran, he likes Obi-Wan. He doesn't really care much about everyone else. He calls them witches and useless people and, you weak Jedi. But with Obi-Wan, he respects him. He likes him. Yeah, I see that.
I will honor you for that.
How kind of you. The Jedi said back, rolling his shoulders as he lifted his blade. But I think you're overestimating your chances, Space Marine. The Jedi added.
Oh, am I now? Is this galaxy so removed from reality that I, an angel of death, must feel fear at the approach of an old witch and her broken tools?
The Marine mocked, legs bending as he crouched subtly, preparing to attack. Perhaps, Obi-Wan said back. Gather what little strength you have left, Space Marine. We will show you that, through the Force, nothing is impossible. Let us settle this, one way or the other, right now. Jocasta felt herself rally at the words. Master Kenobi was right. This man was the equivalent of a Sith Lord, but they were the Jedi Order. And like all times in the past, they would succeed in the present. The Space Marine's grisly smile grew agonizingly wide in response.
I agree. It is long past time that we finish this.
Surprisingly, the Space Marine did not lunge afterwards, settling back into a wider stance and raising his free hand. As he whipped his stave around and braced it against his arm and back, stance set, he fanned his fingers forward.
Come then, warp eaters. I'll give you something to choke upon.
Ah, man, you should have said, be careful not to choke on your aspirations. Sorry, guys. I just remembered Rogue One, with Darth Vader. Be careful not to choke on your aspirations, director.
Captain Yoren had been consumed by his responsibility.
Lord Admiral? Okay. Sorry, AFanWithTooMuchTime, sorry. But yeah,
helping to coordinate the ship's internal security response. He felt blood draining from his face as, over time, more and more systems were lost or crippled by the Jedi combatants. The librarian, Epistolary Saphran, had been dispatched to stop the Jedi at once, and, from the looks of it, had drawn a fair number of them away and kept them there. Even now, reports told him that he was battling against 2 or 3 Jedi strike forces alone. He expected no less of the Space Marine. But that had not stopped the Jedi from knocking out inter-system communications, disabling most of his major weapon systems, and disabling most critical control systems outside of the bridge itself, which stood braced for an attack. The best he'd been able to do was bleed the attacking Psychers to some degree, and that now bore fruit as their forces seemed to be at a near standstill. But just this much had taken all of his focus. And so he was disoriented when an officer from one of the stations successfully screamed himself into focus and drew the captain's attention back to the void. The Jedi strike craft had been cutting holes and dealing extensive damage to one of his 2 escorts, and the remaining vessel, which had been docked with a captured ship, had uncoupled itself from the prisoner vessel and had begun firing at it. But none of this was the source of the bridge officer's evidently dire alarm. "Captain, Auspex returns are signaling new Xenos contacts!" The man in question called from his station. "The numbers are... Scans are reading 400... No, 900... Sir, a massive armada is entering the system!"
The victory fleet. The Chancellor's here to save the day.
He added in a near panic. The captain straightened, drawing his focus away from the console in his command throne. "Show me!" Yoren ordered. Seconds later, a massive green hololith was projected over his throne, displaying the edge of the Axumite system and the orbits of its worlds and stellar objects, and, most concerningly, a red pulse which denoted new contacts. With a wave of his hand, he signaled the display to zoom in, and felt his eyes threatening to pop from his skull as it did. Thousands of ships were arriving. Thousands! Most were far smaller than his cruiser, failing to quite match the length of his 2 escorts. Yet, that discrepancy hardly mattered when he was working with 2 crippled ships and a hopefully fully functional escort against a swelling force of over 8,000 ships. He saw that the single able escort was already turning away from its low priority target, allowing the escaping ship to fall, burning into the planet's sky. He queued up the 2 other captains on his throne-mounted command console before looking up towards the communications station. Comm officer, send a Vox message to the surface of New Cadia. Tell them to prepare for a catastrophic enemy invasion of the world. Tell them that we will purchase all the time we can. And remind them that the Emperor protects, he ordered. The captain's face was drawn and cut with deep, dark lines. He stood in the way of his death with the grim determination of a man who had made peace with his hatred and planned to ride it all the way into the mouth of hell. Yet, his comms officer looked back at the captain with a crisp smile. "Will do, but, sir, we've just received another transmission," the man said back. "From the other two ships?" Yorn asked, perplexed. "No, sir, from the other end of the system," the man said back. "Captain, new contacts, and, Emperor willing, they seem friendly," said the sensor's operator. "Stop wasting time and patch through the transmission," Yorin ordered. "Patching through now, sir," the comms operator said. A moment later, a shaky, hazy hololith of a woman dressed in an ornate uniform appeared before them.
Admiral Rolla, Lord Admiral Rolla.
Standing tall and enormous over them like some kind of titan. The captain gasped and lowered himself out of his command throne, resting one knee and one fist upon the steel floor of his bridge, as he kneeled before his superior officer, now come to collect he and his wayward ship.
Captain Yorin,
she said, her tone less than pleasant. Lord Admiral Rolla, Yorin said in answer, offering no excuses and begging no clemency. She stared down upon him, eyes hard as diamonds, as she weighed him.
But you see, Commissar Shadrach, this is how you respect your superior officers in the Imperium of Man. When you see them, you kneel, you go down on one knee, almost immediately. You don't start questioning whether I should or shouldn't do it. No, you do it immediately. You must be like Captain Yorin here. Poor guy's gonna die probably, but you know, at least he was respectable to his superior officer, unlike you, Shadrach.
The man had abandoned the bulk of the fleet, and worst of all, now found himself paying for it with the current situation. Insubordination could well mean death, but failure was the precursor to extinction, and it was not tolerated. Still, all of this he had not done on his own. His own fleet admiral had ordered the action, and he himself had been moved by the words of a Space Marine chapter master in the form of Davik Thune. In the face of this, her hardness relaxed somewhat. She would test his true mettle now and judge him upon that.
rise, Captain Yorin, and take up your posts. The fleet of Zektek has come to the aid of New Cadia, and we will need every shred of iron, every drop of blood available to us to even begin the halt of coming armada. Rouse your faith in your fury, Captain, for the Emperor protects, and today, we are his shield.
Now, what I asked in episode 27 comes into play with the Victory Fleet. Did the Emperor upgrade... did the Chancellor and his tactician, did they upgrade this fleet to, go toe-to-toe with the Zektek fleet of the Imperium of Man? Did they upgrade this fleet up to specs in terms of shields, weapons, weapon systems, to actually have a chance against these vessels? That's the number one question there, because you can come here with 8,000 ships. Very impressive, I must add. Very impressive in terms of the numbers. But we've already seen what happens in a conflict between these two opposing forces, between the Republic Navy and the Imperium of Man, battle fleets here. It's a terrible situation. A terrible, bloody situation in terms of the Republic. They can destroy maybe 1 or 2 or 3 frigates, but the majority of the fleet, they can't deal with that. They just can't. So I'm just wondering, what is the answer to this problem in terms of the Republic? What is this tactician going to do? What is the Chancellor going to do with his, foresight? Because he believes that there's going to be a victory here. He believes he's going to teach these guys a lesson. And I don't really have any faith in him and his tactician now.
The machine had offered its wisdom in the form of a warning, but that wisdom had been denied. The machine was not spiteful for it, but it was not merciful to the arrogant priest. This being born on faith that had descended into the hardness of truth from the world of flesh and lies, and proclaimed itself to be above the score of historical precedent. Swaddled in fear and pride, this human thing sought power that was utterly beyond its capacity to withstand.
Never, I know you can do it. You wouldn't do this if you didn't know you could do it. I know you can do it. I have to believe in that, Yeah. Good luck, Nerva.
But that was not the machine's concern. It regretted, as much as it could, the limited sentience it had been allowed to own. It was just enough to feel a modicum of remorse, as it disregarded its safety protocols and complied with the humans' demands for mental and likely physical suicide. But such was truth. The truth that was, the truth that is, the truth that will be. Without query or pause, the machine brought down its full datascape, funneling the new data through the priest's mind-machine interface unit, and beginning a convent pattern upload of all relevant mentalscape adaptations. The priest's avatar, a woman robed in scarlet sheets of cloth, stood defiant before its own representation. The ends of its red garments drifting without gravity around the human, its eyes conveying the hubris of its untested will. But those eyes, so hard and desperately proud before, began to convey something else as the naked interface began. Hardline mental caches, mem format impliers, and psycho-retangent and pacification arrays completed their limited adaptations, aligning with the priest's existing cogitation matrix as best as they could manage, before plunging into the creviced space of the human's organic mind. If it had allowed itself the hours of adaptation the machine required to shape the mind of its prospective user, then the various new applications and function enablers would have met with metaphorically prepared sockets, awaiting input though unused. But, naked and unaltered, the human mind responded to the sudden, ruthless intrusion like a human mind would respond to being stabbed by various sharp and blunt objects. The priest began to experience the beginning of its death suffering. The avatar screamed, floating into the air moments later as the woman's shaped representation began to writhe and twist without control.
Come on, Nerva, you can do this.
The human's expectation of orientation was gone, and so it floated like detritus in a still tank of water, drifting more in accordance to its wild thrashing than to anything else. The machine felt what must have been some mild approximation of pity, but it would not stop now. Perhaps it even could not.
I think it's enjoying this. Somehow, some way, it's enjoying watching, this woman suffer. It's enjoying this, because, she's not going through the proper procedures, she's not doing the proper rites, to use the Imperial Knight. And therefore, maybe the artificial intelligence or the machine spirit inside this Imperial Knight feels as if it's being insulted. And it wants to teach this girl a lesson, or teach this woman a lesson that she will never forget. Yeah.
Information enough to fill nearly a decade or more of human flesh time was poured into the freshly opened interfaces which led into the agonized human mind. When the mind resisted, the data was forced, less poured now and more pumped. The hippocampus began to heat within the skull of the priest, working millions of times faster than it would ever need to as data was burned into unsuspecting neurons.
Like, what kind of data is this exactly? Oh, so much.
Had the hopeful pilot not been augmented for the process already, this would have meant instant brain death. As it was, the artificial systems themselves were in danger of being overcome by the rapid relay of so much information, all of it needing to be placed in a very particular order within the subject's chaotic mind. To the human it was happening to, the whole process would feel akin to being fatally stabbed with a blunt fire hose, and yet being alive whilst the hose was turned on, still secured within them while they remained just conscious enough to feel the gushing torrent of water rip into and rearrange their organs as it filled them utterly.
This image is from Homeworld, isn't it? Yeah, I can see the background behind this lady. It's got the galaxy, and that's the galaxy loading map for Homeworld, I remember. Yes, Karen Sajet. Yes, you could actually say Nerva is like Karen Sajet right now, She's becoming the mothership. Nerva is becoming the mothership here. as she connects herself to the Imperial Knight. Yeah. That's a nice connection there. AFanWithTooMuchTime. Yeah, that's good.
It was here that most humans died. Overstimulation, shock, or even simple neural collapse. There were dozens of ways to find death in this complicated suicide. But the human was not dead. Not yet, at least.
Yeah, show them, Nerva.
The priest had somehow worked through the pain, organizing itself around the new data enough to not die from its reception. Oh, how the machine did wish this was the conclusion of its test. But were it so, it would not have bothered warning the human beforehand that this was not survivable. Now that it had filled the pilot with its own data, the pilot now needed to fill the machine with itself. And it was here that it would die. Probes and data siphons descended down into the still quivering flesh mind of the priest, injecting themselves in and eliciting a new series of pain responses from its struggling form. The human's avatar trembled and flailed without pattern or regularity, its shape beginning to stretch and deform as its internal perspective began to almost literally melt due to the overstimulation. Though the shape of the avatar would return to normal a few seconds after each spasmodic burst of suffering, the machine knew it would not be much longer. It was a true operator, a candidate which would have been worthy of its function, just like the first of the would-be pilots. The machine ensured that it would survive within the archaeobanks of its memory. Yet another ghost it might use to warn the future about the folly of the past. But before then, there was the present, and presently, only one step remained. Full integration. Just as it had pushed vast portions of itself into the mind of the aspiring pilot, Now it needed the operator's mind in return.
Why can't you just copy and paste? Why must you cut out and paste? Just copy and paste. What's so hard about doing that? Hey.
All of the knight's pseudo-thoughts, all of its feelings, such as they were, had been developed from the amalgamation of the machine and the many mind wraiths of the pilots who had come to use it. To obtain these cognitive imprints, to try to make itself whole by scouring the missing parts from these willing human minds, it needed a full accounting of the human who was to be its host. Only then could it take what it needed, and then what it wanted. This was what it got from the exchange, the partnership with its twisted creators. The data siphons it had pierced the priest with now activated and churned. The human's avatar, previously writhing, went rigid, freezing in the air, even its trembling having suddenly subsided, though the expression locked onto its face was one of sheer horror. The siphons began to draw the soul center, the very seat of the priest's consciousness, inside the machine's own mindscape, draining every thought, memory, and potential into the machine. This space, this whole process, was normally achieved in a slow, subtle, almost subconscious way, and it was still not a pleasant experience for the human. Here they would combine, and here it would see the human's entire self, and remember it for all time. Here it would image the priest's mind ghost, and, as it died, steal its human soul for itself. The avatars present shifted to represent this as well, the woman's own fading and becoming translucent, certain portions of her reappearing into the machine's avatar, replacing the empty chunks and missing pieces of its silver body with her own. In this way, in spite of its necessary lobotomy, the faithful flame lived once more. It savored the moment, its mind and her mind losing the seams between each other, each completing the other, if only momentarily. And now, as it took and took, her body and mind gave and gave until they gave out. But
Nerva.
then it stopped. The process ground to a halt, and with sudden displeasure, the machine found itself the subject of pain and discomfort. The human, perhaps sensing the impossibility of her survival, was resisting its attempts to integrate her. The half-ghost face of her personal avatar shifted, slowly taking on the expression of a determined scowl. With a casual disdain, the machine opened and looked upon the data it had taken already, seeing a full list of her every augmentation and enhancement. It was obvious that this human had done something unique or unstandard with her memcore, or perhaps some other adaptation that made her able to resist. To its shock, there was nothing listed there that could cause this phenomenon. Testing her again, it renewed, and then doubled its attempts to download her mind. It made some progress, but again it was resisted and eventually halted. Now the machine was more than annoyed. It was interested, perhaps even wary. It drew from its other mind ghosts, summoning to the fore a legion of former humans, all pilots who had lived and died after being integrated within its vast self. It gave them reason and emulated their will, but could not quite make them its own thoughts.
So this machine spirit has decided to have like a little discussion with past, with past attemptees, if I can call them that. Those who attempted to connect to to the Imperial Knight, and they're going to discuss amongst themselves about what should we do next. Wow. Just allow her in, okay? Stop gatekeeping. Stop it. Just allow her in. Give her this opportunity. No. Never take this opportunity with both hands. You're almost there. Don't let this machine spirit, win the day. No. You are Karen Sajet. You are Fleet Command.
Still, between the sudden chatter of thousands of personalities, there existed the variance to construct its own false thoughts. It was upon these pseudo-musings that the machine decided its next course. It intruded into her systems, a relatively easy thing for it at this point, and shut down all of her augmentations that were not required to maintain the mind-machine interface. A fresh swell of despair, a sudden collapse, and the sensation of stopped siphons suddenly flowing was what the machine expected to sense in the aftermath of the act. Instead, precious little changed. There was a deepening of the strain, a slight sliding of the grip as it were, but it lasted no longer than a second before the human had taken a proper hold of her mind once more and halted the download again. Simulations of anger, indignation, and searing spite flooded the half-mind of the machine. What was happening? How dare she defy the way of things like this? How dare she have this strength? It was futile. And if it were not, then it could not be but sin, but heresy.
Sin? Heresy? Because she's able to do something different now, it's sin and heresy. Please, sit down. Sit down.
The metaphorical hands of thousands upon thousands of former knights took hold of the cavorting, twisting streams of obstinate data, pulling and tearing, raging against her defiance with an all-too-human fury that now possessed the machine's spirit. They pulled her in, struggling step by struggling step, drawing more and more of her mind into the machine's realm, memory after memory, thought by thought. Her every dream and desire, her every fear and projection was dragged laboriously into the false space. Yet more kept coming and coming. More than memory, more than mere thought. With slow, dawning dread, the half-mind and many ghosts which composed the spirit of the war machine realized what it had been spooling in, even once memory and thought had been drained and all knowledge and emotion had been dragged within its mem-vaults. This nebulous, incomprehensible substance, of which there seemed to be no end. It was will. Her will. The
willpower.
Might and muscle of her mind, which should have been dwarfed by the knowledge and thought contained within. But no, what was typical of other humans was inverted here. She did not have a faltering memory, nor was she the victim of ignorance or a lack of education, nor was her mind smaller than any other. No, all of that was as the machine had expected. And yet her willpower dwarfed these things like the shadow of a sun might dwarf a planet. This pool, this well of near endless mental power, yet untapped, yet unknown to the very mind which hosted it, awakened with the candor of a roused dragon, and with a terrifying pull reversed the flow of the data siphons, drawing herself back out from this mind realm.
Yes.
Her avatar fell to the ground and burst into light. light which did not dim, but rather swelled and swelled with every passing second. The machine released her, as did its many proxies, but this was not enough. For as the priest pulled herself entirely from the machine's mind, she began a pull of her own. At first, there was only confusion. What was she doing? Some kind of vain attempt at revenge? Some petty form of retribution? No, the machine would realize, as it felt itself being pulled into her. She still fully intended to make use of this war machine, but she would not allow herself to be integrated all in one moment. She would not survive it. However, what the priest known as Nerva now attempted was the reverse. She was integrating it, pulling it out of its machine shell and into her own mind. The machine shuddered both internally and through its own iron skin as it came to understand that she was installing it, wearing it like she would wear an augmentation. And she could, for her will was vast.
Resistance is futile.
It was a will meant to crown a queen of iron. It was the hidden sign of the Princeps, the Titan within the flesh. Normally it was the honor of the human pilot to serve at the pleasure of their ancestors and the war machine who bore them. This time, however, it was the honor of the machine to bow and become an extension to such a supreme and worthy wielder. Bereft of comfort, racked in agony, and now robed in steel and weapons of war, the Princeps named Nerva called in silent command, and the knight known as the Faithful Flame roared in proud answer.
Running full system diagnostics. Machine status fully operational. System online. All stations are now enabled. Target dog the resistance. Operation Overkill.
Okay, guys, that is it. That is it with Star Wars versus Warhammer 40K, episode 28, Warriors, War Machines, War, made by a fan with too much time. Yeah, we've been going on the battlefield, going to the battlefield with Sando and the Commando clone troops, and yeah, they are fighting. They are really fighting against the Sisters of Battle. But, like I said before, the Sisters of Battle, with their zealotry, their faith, their, their willpower, if I can say that too, their willpower is just so. You just can't defeat it conventionally. You can't defeat it with guns and with soldiers and with bombs and stuff like that. These women are here no matter what the cost, no matter what happens. They are here to defeat the enemy. And, luckily, the clones have got, backup coming there to support them in terms of mechanized units. And yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what happens in that battlefield in future episodes. But so far, the Sisters of Battles also have their own mechanized units that are firing missiles. The clone troops have their own, which are firing, artillery weapons. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Yeah. Saphran is back with round 2 of the battle with the Jedi. Yes, they took out his heart, or they cut out his heart, they stabbed or punctured his lungs. It doesn't matter. He has, secondary organs for this specific situation, so he's going to be fine. Like I've always said before, the only way to make sure that these guys are dead is to cut off the head and then throw a grenade into the neck, just for control, just for good measure, because you never know. Another set of eyes might just start popping up on the chest or somewhere, and then they're back in business. So you gotta throw a grenade in there, let the body blow up from the inside out, and then you can say that person is dead. Saphran is back. Balaba needs to meditate. She is being consumed by the dark side. She's even, killing her own colleagues out here. Well, I don't know if he's dead. The guy who was trying to stop her, I don't know if he's actually dead, but she's becoming a very dangerous liability now to the group, and she needs to be, put to sleep or something. I don't know. And she needs to just meditate and just let go of this dark side influence that is consuming her. And then we also had Iskander and the Chosen One. The Chosen One is really surprising all of us out here. And I'm actually quite happy that, Anakin is still in control, and he's extremely powerful, far more powerful than even he realizes or anyone else realized. And Iskander is in complete shock. He's in complete shock. What is this Chosen One? What is your purpose? Why? Who made this prophecy of this Chosen One? He's just bewildered. He's in complete shock. And yeah, it seems like there is a prophecy, something similar to this prophecy, that is also being told or understood in the Warhammer 40K galaxy. So I'm just wondering, what does that entail exactly? Hopefully Iskander will further explain his thoughts about it. And then we also had which one was it? Oh yes, the very latest one right now. Yeah, Nerva, controlling the Imperial Knight, making it her toy to use instead of the Imperial Knight, making Nerva the toy. She's flipped that around, and now she's in complete control. And yes, essentially she has become Sajet. She's become Sajet. She's become the mothership. She's become, Fleet Command, and I'm happy for her. I'm really, really proud of her. And, hopefully she will be able to continue, doing the Omnissiah's great work through the Imperial Knight on the battlefield. because they're going to be needing help, because reinforcements are coming in with the Chancellor with his 8,000 vessels, and of course yes, also Battlefleet Zek is also here. So we're gonna have to wait and see what happens in that space battle. But on the ground, I'm 85% sure that there are going to be reinforcements coming in, and Nerva is going to be needed on this battlefield more than ever. She and her Imperial Knight are going to be needed. Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But with the Chancellor, like I've been saying, you know, hopefully he upgraded his vessels, because if he didn't, this is going to be a very short battle. A very funny short battle. Yeah. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Guys, that is it for today with AFanWithTooMuchTime. Remember, if you want to check out the original video as well as AFanWithTooMuchTime's YouTube channel, the links are in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay?